Hey everyone, my name is Katie Robertson. I'm the founder and director for the Anchor Gathering, and this is the Anchor Moment, and I want to tell you a little bit about what that is. It's a time we get to hear from a guest a little bit about their life, their faith journey, and an anchor moment. And that is a time that someone has had their faith grounded and they've seen Jesus for real in their lives. So we are so excited at this time you get to hear firsthand a personal story from one of our guests, and we hope that you'll be encouraged.
I'm Jody Duppenthaler, and I live in Tacoma, Washington. I was born actually in Seattle, but have lived in the Tacoma, Seattle area most of my life. I am married to Bill Duppenthaler. We're going on 38 years of marriage, a long time. And I have 3 adult children. I have a daughter who is 31, almost 32 years old, and she's happily married, no kids. And then I have twin boys, Peter and Andrew, that are 30 years old, and they're both happily married, and they're the ones who have provided 4 of my grandchildren. It's a blessing to have grandchildren. I have been involved in ministry for really since I came to know Jesus. So it's been like 40 some years. I hate even saying that because I sound so old when I say that. But before I get into that, I should just tell a little bit about how I got into ministry. First with YoungLife for almost 40 years, and then now with Legacy, which is an organization my husband started 3 years ago. Before I met Jesus, I was kind of a floundering teenager, adolescent really, just searching for, I think I was just starving for love. And I think deep in my heart from childhood, I knew that God was love and loved me, but I think I didn't receive that in faith until I was about 21 years old. And after floundering and being in limbo land and making many, many bad choices in my life, ones that I've regretted, but God's forgiven, but ones that were too horrible to even mention. But needless to say, God met me in my darkness, and He basically spoke to me honestly in what I felt like was an audible voice. Haven't had that happen too many times in my life, but I was sitting in a church. I wasn't following the Lord, but my brothers had invited me, and it was an Easter service in Tacoma, and they were doing a cool little, Easter little thing with kids, but I was sort of half paying attention because then it was like the pastor was speaking, but I wasn't totally listening because the Lord said to me, as audible as if a person behind my ear was speaking in my ear, and He said, "Jody, why do you keep searching for unconditional love when I'm the only one who can provide it?" And I remember going, gulp. Oh my gosh, you're right, Lord. Well, you'd think I would have gone up for the altar call, but I didn't. Later on that day, I was in my parents' yard, and it was a beautiful spring day. I remember this like it was yesterday. It was a lot of years ago. I sat outside on my curb of my parents' yard, and I said, "Jesus, I give you everything." And that really pretty much changed the trajectory of my life forever. My favorite verse, I'm going to just say this because I use it for everybody and everything. It's Psalm 37:4. My Gmail address is 37:4. And it's, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." And I still apply that today to everything. To delight myself in Him, He will give you the desires of my heart. So after many boyfriends in the past, when my adolescent years, some quite serious, some not so serious, I finally gave that part of my life up to the Lord, and then lo and behold, I met Bill Duppenthaler, and he was an answer to prayer. And been involved in YoungLife for a lot of years in all sorts of ways, volunteer leader, on staff part-time with women in an area, on regional staff, and then a couple years ago, there was a little bit of a curveball with YoungLife thrown at me, but that just got me back to my knees and saying, "Okay, Lord, what next?" And one cool little piece is that the Lord did is He moved us to France for 4 years after our kids left for college. This is kind of my time in my life that one of the things that there's 2 pieces to it. One was the actual move. My husband we felt like the Lord was saying yes, but I was kind of going kicking and screaming. A little bit with my feet in the ground, I don't know if I want to go, because I loved Gig Harbor and I loved the community and had lots of friends and people I knew, and I didn't want to necessarily up my life, and also didn't want to pull the rug out from my college age kids, because in my college years it was so tumultuous. I ended up back home 3 times with my parents, so I felt like I was just going whoop. Okay, we're going to France, have a good life. It was through that experience that I really, again, on a deeper level, learned to trust the Lord, because there we were in a foreign country, couldn't speak the language, and and people in France are not super easy to get to know. They're great, but they don't necessarily ask you about your life like we do here with people. And so it's like no one ever asked me even about like my history. No one even asked, and then I was asking them. But anyhow, we had ministry there for 4 years. It was super great. I would never exchange. It was hard. But when we left, there had been something that had gone on in our family with one of my young adult twins, and he had gotten in a serious relationship with a woman that everyone was kind of saying, no, just hold off. And as young people do, they don't, this tunnel vision, they don't listen. And so anyway, long story short, we hadn't seen him in our whole entire family for over a year. And when I left for France, I tried to see him one more time, and they wouldn't answer the door. And so we go off to France, and it was very hurtful. Like, as a mom, it was just hard. During the year he wasn't showing up, I was always praying and crying, crying and praying, and just asking the Lord to intervene and to just do a miracle of bringing him back to our family. And it was in France, our very first fall there. We were trying to figure out where we were going to live, and we were in Lyon, France, is in the middle, and we heard that Hillsong was doing a worship night. And Hillsong hadn't even started their church yet there, but they were doing a worship night. So Bill and I, we were there for the weekend trying to figure out where in Lyon we were going to live. And we went to this great worship night, and they had chairs set up, but then there were so many people there, they had to remove the chairs. So we all stood for like over 2 hours of worship, and it was amazing, even though a lot of it was in French. But the thing that the Lord did, they had a short little message in the middle. And it was so simple, but for me it meant everything, because in the midst of me praying for this miracle with Andrew and praying for something to happen, the pastor said, whatever's going on in your life, whatever relationally is going on or financially, whatever, God is bigger than this. He can take care of it. And in the midst of that worship, as I was worshiping, just tears rolled down my face, because I just had another level of kind of just releasing it to the Lord. I mean, it's peeled, layers of peeling and releasing and praying. But this was I just felt something in my spirit. Later on, about 4 days later, I got an email from my mom. She said, Jody, my son and his wife had talked to a couple people in my family that knew the situation we're praying, and they might be coming to Christmas. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was so excited. The long story short of it is the Lord started to bring them back into our fold. Then after we moved back home from France 4 years later, and things had gotten a lot better, but they were still a little bit like kind of walking on rice paper, if you know what I mean. But they were still a lot better, and we were seeing our son again. But when we moved back home, through a series of things that happened in his life, he ended up living with us for like the first 2 years. We moved back to Tacoma after being in France. And that was such a redeeming time of relationally with our son. And I mean, I've gone through lots of things in my decades with the Lord, even before the Lord, but and a lot of anchor moments for me that God has just showed up to be real in so many powerful ways. I mean, there's story after story of His goodness and His realness, but I just wanted to share that little one, because I know that there are lots of times when your children hit those ages that there can be difficulties, but God is faithful and sees us through, and if we just delight in Him, He gives us the desires of our hearts. I trust in Him and bank on that. I hope you do too.